What's up, good looking? Yeah, I'm talking to you. Welcome back to the Thought Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Barr. Today's going to be episode 17 you're about to watch. We talk with Dr. Douglas Posey. In this podcast, we talk to past and current thought leaders in the realm of health, wealth, relationships, so we can reach past, current, and honestly, aspiring thought leaders. People that you have a message, you have a mastery, you've been working towards your passion, and you want to get it out to the world, but you struggle taking that next step. We want to understand these people's stories, the good, the bad, the ugly, so we can glean knowledge for you, and then number two, potentially motivate or inspire you to take that next step into the uncomfort zone, to become a thought leader yourself. Awesome podcast today. Dr. Douglas has done a bunch. He is a veteran of the United States Army. A little bit more about him. He is a board certified forensic pathologist and an author. He is a graduate of Alcorn State University and Wayne State University School of Medicine. He's worked as a medical examiner and pathologist in several states. He is a frequent lecturer on forensic science, and he's the author of the book From Mississippi to the Morgue, A Black Doctor's Journey from Rural Mississippi to Forensic Pathology. Dr. Posey, distinguished board certified forensic, anatomic, and clinical pathologist. He tells me what that is, by the way. So if you don't know what it is, I asked the question for you. And he's a visionary in the field of forensic science. He's got a background including roles as president, founder of the Forensic Scientists, LLC, and as an associate medical examiner with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. He brings unparalleled expertise. A prolific author and lecturer, Dr. Posey's profound insights have shaped modern pathology and forensic practices. He also went to Howard. Awesome. I have notes from what we talked about. He's empowering and encouraging people to do what they feel called to do. That's what he feels a thought leader is. We talk about being the person as a pathologist, being behind the scenes, not being the person that gets the credit or gets the glory, and why he does it anyway, where he finds his passion. If you're someone and you're kind of behind the scenes in life, how can you find your passion with what you do and keep it at the forefront? Absolutely love that. He talked about the current justice system for juveniles and what we can do to potentially shape it. He talked about giving new outlets and providing different and new resources to rising children in schools, potentially children that are at risk, that have been in juvenile detention, and what they can do to find their outlet. He's a wealth of knowledge. He has had a huge background. He talks about really being the person that can extend the arm to someone else to get them outside their comfort zone. And once we can do it, to pay it forward, what it meant for him and what he wants to do for the next generation. It's an amazing, amazing podcast. If you like it, make sure you comment below. That's how we grow this. It's free to like this and subscribe and comment. I promise. And if you get charged, let me know about it. Even if you comment and say, I hate this guy. I hate this redhead. He seems weird. This is why I don't like him. I got thick skin. People make fun of me all the time. Speaking of the people that make fun of me, this podcast is brought to you by Thought Leader. We have an incredible company culture. I'm just the fool. Let me tell you a little bit about Thought Leader. Over the last 8 years, this company has made it a mission to help its coaching and consulting clients get their authentic message out to the world in hopes of reaching their own desired audience through the power of speaking and business building. Dr. Posey did the first one. With over 650 clients landing TEDx talks, hundreds more speaking on virtual and physical stages around the world, Thought Leader has perfected the art of delivering a top-tier message. They also offer programs to build and scale your high-ticket program and authentically market and sell it to your target audience in order to build a sustainably scaled business. So if you have a message in your heart, you got a mastery or a passion in your mind, you're wanting to get it out there and figure out how to shape that message so it lands the best, or how to shape that message so you can build a business around it. There's webinars below in the description. Make sure you check them out. Webinars are free. You can talk to someone on the team to talk about your idea and figure out what best path is right for you. What path is right for you and is best? Whatever. Click the links below. Enjoy this podcast with Mr. Douglas Posey, Dr. Douglas Posey. And we will be seeing you like right now. I'm just going to shift over to me. What's up, everybody? And welcome back to the Thought Leader podcast. I am your host, Dylan. We are on episode 17. Holy shit, we keep going. We're going to be talking in the realm of health today. We're going to be talking forensic science. We're going to be talking forensic pathology. We're going to be talking about authorship. We're going to be talking about the juvenile justice reform. And it's all going to be done with Dr. Posey. Super excited to go into your story. Dr. Posey, thank you for being on the Thought Leader podcast.
And thank you for the invitation, Dylan.
And I would love to start from the top. Thank you for everything that you've done. You're telling me you served in our Army up until 1970, correct?
Yes.
Thank you so much for everything that you've done. Let's start, though. Dr. Posey, I like to ask this question at the top. Everybody that's on here, it's called the Thought Leader podcast, right? And I think that word is subjective. Like if we were to just call a spade, people look at it differently. You're on here for everything that you've done, right? What does being a thought leader mean to you?
Thought leader means being empowered. It means being around encouraging people. It means that you're around people who will allow you to be yourself. I can dare to be different with this group. I don't have to hold back. My dream for the juvenile that we'll mention are so big that they scare me sometimes. And I would suggest that if your dreams don't scare you, at least sometimes they're not big enough.
Yeah. I like Jim Collins talks about the BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goals. And he said if they don't scare you, they're not good enough, right?
They're not quite big enough and you need to reset them.
And you have done a bunch, right? You have a graduate at Alcorn State. You have a master. You went to Wayne State University School of Medicine. You went into forensic science. You've been the president. You've been on boards. You've been a founder. You have done a bunch. And it all kind of comes around this area of forensic science, forensic pathology, and then what you want to do for juvenile reform, right? I love to know where stories start. So if you could kind of take us back, do you know where you got your inspiration for crime-based education, right? Do you know like when in your life this became a thing?
I think it didn't gel, but my uncle, who's not much older than I am, and he's my late uncle at this point, was the youngest prisoner at Parchman Penitentiary in Parchman, Mississippi. And that was always kind of a cloud in and over the family. And I was never able to forget about that over the years.
And then what, as you continue to grow up, right? Because you have this cloud there. What was the inspiration? Like, do you remember, like, what fueled you to want to go into, let's say, forensics to start, right? You get out of the military, you go to school, and you start thinking forensics. What fueled this passion for you?
Well, it didn't quite happen that way, Dylan.
Okay.
I got out of the United States Army where I'd studied medical technology. And the pathologist that I worked for encouraged me to go to medical school. So I went to medical school, graduated from Wayne State University.
Go Warriors.
Became the first person of color to study general pathology, clinical and anatomic pathology at the United States Naval Hospital in San Diego. I went on to become board certified in anatomic and clinical pathology. I taught pathology at Howard University, School of Medicine, Meharry Medical College, and I practiced in the hospital for about 20, 21 years. And then I heard that my dear friend and someone who I really looked up to, Dr. Joy Carter, became the first African American female to become chief medical examiner of a major office in the United States. I left the hospital in St. Joseph, Missouri, Heartland Health System, to come to Houston to study under her.
What was the, if you don't mind me asking, right? Because so it really starts with pathology. What
Yes.
was then the call to say, like, you see this in the news, you see what she's accomplished. What was the call for you to be like, I'm leaving what I'm doing and I'm going to study under her?
I think, well, both she and I had been at the historic Howard University
Mhm,
at different times. Uh, and I had always been, quietly intrigued by forensic pathology and
mhm,
the medical examiner.
mhm.
They said that forensic science is the hottest topic since Miss O'Leary's cow allegedly started the Great Chicago Fire.
Hmm.
So I guess it had been kind of smoldering, in and around me over the years. And then when I heard that Dr. Joy Carter was at Harris County in Houston, Texas, I picked up the telephone and called her.
Hmm.
And she told me that the tough part was going to be getting a Texas license. She had a spot reserved for me where she'd like to train me.
Amazing. So part of it is
And
knowing her at going to Howard, right? But then the other one is almost like you're wanting this challenge of the forensic lens of pathology. So this is where I'd like to, and I do apologize because I know this is your life's work. I'm not going to say it's me asking this question, but maybe someone that's watching this. Can you break down? Because, like you said, you're going anatomic, clinical pathology, right? Can we break down pathology and what you do as a pathologist for our viewers?
sure we can. Pathology is the study of why we get sick or why we get diseases or what illnesses or why we get cancer. And so the study of pathology then is, Dylan, we are physicians for the physicians. We don't see patients.
Hmm.
We're a doctor for the doctors.
Hmm.
The doctor comes to us, he gets a collection of laboratory information. Remember, when you go to the hospital, they always stick a needle in your arm and give you a cup to pee in.
Yeah.
And that look like every day they come and take some blood.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, as a clinical pathologist, I provide the leadership, the guidance for the technicians who perform that, and the interpretation for my clinical colleagues.
Got it.
On the other hand, anatomic pathology, someone was smart enough years ago to say, we don't want general surgeons operating just because they like to operate.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
The tumor board was established, and it was established that every piece of tissue taken from a patient, irrespective of how small, inpatient or outpatient, must be sent to pathology for examination.
Hmm.
And for example, if we find out, that you're continually sending us normal appendices, and the patients, don't have the appropriate clinical findings, well, we first call you in on the carpet and give you the old arms around the back and arms around the shoulder and tell you to check your uh, check your parameters.
Hmm.
Because if you continue to do that, you could stand to lose your privileges. We don't want patients being operated on unnecessarily.
Hmm.
And so that's the role we play in anatomic pathology. Now,
So
in
I want to get to forensic pathology next, but just so I can get this down with pathologists, like you said, you are the doctor for the doctor. So when I'm bringing this in, what I see it as is you're the person behind the scenes, right? You're almost that but the person behind the scenes studying this as everything comes in, and also being the messenger for the doctor so they know what they need to be doing. And then when you get into anatomic pathology, you're kind of the checks and balances of these people. So a lot of what you do is behind the curtain. Would you say that's correct?
Yes,
Okay.
and it takes a certain type of personality. The pathologists enjoy being behind the scenes and pulling the buttons and guiding our clinical colleagues in the right direction so that our patients get better.
And I want to come back to, I really do want to touch on the behind the scenes aspect, but you did start talking of forensics, right? So now that we know that pathologist is the doctor for the doctor, behind the scenes, making sure things have checks and balances, you go into forensics. Tell me a little bit more of like forensic pathology now.
Now, forensic pathology is where the pathologists join their legal colleagues in a court of law
Hmm.
and provide the necessary information that they need as it relates to the life and death or the injury of our citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And we're there most of the time on homicide cases. We call it homicide. In forensic pathology, homicide simply means that, loss of life at the hands of another.
Yep.
We leave it to the jury to decide intent, and they decide whether it's murder or what degree of murder it is. So we sit along with our clinical colleague, we perform the autopsy, we've collected the DNA, we've done the toxicology, and we've formulated an autopsy report.
Hmm.
And we go into court on the witness stand and provide this information guided by the prosecution, but also with the intent of delivering that information on a level that everyone can understand to
Mm-hmm.
the jury, the judge, and to the defense as well. We
S-
take a neutral role in that. If it's not in my autopsy report, I refuse to comment on it.
So very similar to you're behind the scenes, you're doing all of the research, all the work I'm seeing like in all the labs, but forensics is now let's bring this to the legal standpoint, which I want to get into now. And like you basically say, there's an opening when it comes to rehabilitation and education for the first time in certain areas of our society. So I want to hear about that in a second. But you being the person behind the scenes, you're really helping things as they're going through the court system, as they're going through the court of law. So in my mind, when I watch Law and Order, right, or any of those Law and Order shows, the main characters are like the detectives, they're the lawyers, right? They're going and you're the people that they bring to the stand and who they need to work with in order to get their point across. Would that be true?
Yeah, that is true.
Okay. I just want to make sure like
Yeah.
this
No,
is how I'm viewing it, right?
yeah.
Um so this is everyone sees the detective. Everyone sees the lawyer, right? Like I feel like there's a sense of selflessness to be the person that's behind the scenes. It's like you still want the best of everybody out there, but let's be honest, like you don't get it's not like you get any of the credit. What fuels that for you? You know what I mean? Like you're not the doctor where everyone's like, "Thank you so much." It's like, "Yeah, but I did a lot from behind the scenes." What is it that keeps your passion burning behind the curtain? I think that's tough for a lot of people.
The passion is number one is the intrigue of solving the case,
Mhm.
getting someone on the autopsy table and figured out why they died. Not only the cause of death, which we are mandated by our county and the state and the attorney general to do, but we also want to know the mechanism of death scientifically. Why did this person die? And
Mm.
then we want to be able to take that quote unquote sophisticated language, if you will,
Yeah.
and then go into a court of law and be able to explain that to where high school students, if they were on the jury, which they're not, but some of
Mhm.
them have high school education, would understand what you're talking about. My mentor, the late Dr. Calvin Sampson, editor of the Journal of the National Medical Association, when I was at Howard University, I asked him, Dr. Sampson, how will I know when I've become a good teacher? He said, when you can take your subject matter, teach it to those who don't know what you're talking about. And when you finish, they know, they understand what you're talking about. So when I said all of that to say that when I'm on the witness stand, I'm trying to be a teacher.
Yeah.
I'm teaching the jury, and I'm teaching them at a level and using the language not from the autopsy report, but from which they can understand.
It's so interesting. I've talked to former colleagues in the past, clients that I've worked with, friends, and I say like the ability to break deep knowledge down and communicate it in a way that's easily digestible for anybody is a superpower, right? Like not many people have that. And I think it causes a lot of areas of frustration. People that typically communicate at this level, right? Not to say this is better or worse, but
Yeah.
then to try to talk to someone that's a little bit and then try to sync that up is so vital to get information across to people. I mean, I love that. And I also love what you said is there's this passion to finding it's like you have this deep passion. What fuels you is finding the truth to something, like that deep truth and why it happened.
Yes. And I want to see in if the best of the world. We don't always get there,
Mhm.
but best case scenario, I want to see those who are guilty get punished and those who are innocent get set free.
Yeah. True justice.
True
Right, like,
justice.
that's true justice, not like the blanket justice that we a lot of people see nowadays, but absolute true justice, which brings me to my other question I wanna ask, because you are also very passionate about the juvenile justice reform, and where it's at right now. You see an opening for rehabilitation, education for nonviolent, juvenile offenders, young men of color, like, tell me, 1, what you're doing to help with that and why it's so important, and then we'll talk about what fuels it.
Okay. Well, it's important to me because as we speak, Dylan, 67% of juvenile incarcerees in the United States are boys of color.
Mm,
In my review of the literature, which has been extensive, I haven't found one good thing said about the juvenile justice system. Matter of fact, the Annie Casey, I believe it was Annie Casey, or the juvenile justice system itself in review, gave a critique that said the juvenile justice system is obsolete, dangerous, uh, obsolete and dangerous,
hmm.
ineffective and inefficient. And one in five, at the time I read the study, okay, one in five of these juveniles were being held and had not been charged, had not had a day in court.
Jesus.
But they were still in that position. They're still exposed to physical abuse, sexual abuse, isolation, solitary confinement, and they commit more crime. The rate of recidivism increases, it doesn't decrease from incarceration.
Is it
And
oh, sorry.
hold on to your chair if you haven't heard this one before. In the state of Texas, we spend a little less than $10,000 per student per year for public education. We're spending a little bit in excess of $176,000 per juvenile per year for incarceration.
So, I wanna make sure I'm getting that right. We are putting like, if you think taxpayers, we are putting, per student, $10,000 goes to these students to help them with their education and what they're bringing in. 100 that's per student. $176,000 goes to a juvenile that could be in the system, and like you said, 1 in 5 of them aren't even charged with something yet, but they're in there.
Yes,
Did I hear that correct?
yes. And they are in there for nonviolent things like uh, smoking marijuana, shoplifting, disturbing the peace, obstruction of justice.
If you don't mind, and this comes from a please forgive any ignorance here.
Go
What
ahead.
does that money go to then? Because clearly it doesn't go to the system to solve the challenge. Does it go to like paying electric bills, paying for the places that are like incarcerating them? Where does all that money go to?
I wish I had an answer.
Son of a bitch.
Senator Cory Booker recently authored legislation to try to help parents and relatives of these juveniles not to get into what's been dubbed a debtor's prison. So if that is going on, they're not getting, in my estimation, and from the studies and what I hear, the best of health care.
Mm-hmm.
They're not being educated because they fail to get out and get back into education and catch up or keep up with their peers as they were initially promised. When we talk about juvenile incarceration, and I'd like to reflect back to what I said earlier. I've been studying this extensively, and I haven't seen one good thing said about our juvenile incarceration system.
Mm-hmm. So what do you feel, right? I'm going to do the magic wand right now, right? If you
Mhm.
wave it, like what needs to happen to change this? There's nothing good said about it. What needs to happen at a broad scale, and then what are the first steps we can take to get there, right? Cuz Rome wasn't built in a day.
No.
So what's the overhaul and what are the steps to get there?
Well, I'm not going to sit here and propose to you or say to you that I know the answer to that. But here's what I'm proposing,
Mhm.
okay? And this is Doug Posey. It is under the umbrella of futureforensicscientist.org, which is a nonprofit, but I am the chief cook and bottle washer. So it's just me. I'm working with an educator,
Mhm.
and we're going to put together what's called a crime-based curriculum. Okay. I want to teach. My proposal would be that the students would be taught from the crime scene. Okay.
Mhm.
Kind of a modified something on the order of who was it? Virginia Montessori.
Yeah.
We'd have crime scenes. That our football field would not be used for athletics. It would be just one huge crime scene.
Hmm.
Okay, and we're gonna teach them how to gather evidence, how to preserve evidence, how to get DNA, and how to solve crime. We're gonna teach them how to we'd have marked a trial, for example, so they would hone their skills as an orator by presenting their case as either a prosecutor or a defender. Some of the students would participate as judge, jurors, and lawyers, in the courtroom. They would have to write up their briefs.
Mhm.
I believe I believe that one of the challenges that we're having in the public school system is we have overcrowded and underfunded classrooms.
Hmm.
We have students at one end. If you imagine a Gaussian distribution curve, you got students at one end of the curve who's ahead of the class.
Mhm.
They get labeled as troublemakers and sent off to alternative schools because they're not challenged by what's going on in the classroom.
Mhm.
I believe that we have some leaders, future leaders for our community,
Mhm.
sitting in juvenile incarceration.
Mm.
On the opposite end of the spectrum, Dylan, there are students who could make it, who are going to become dropouts, but they could make it if there was enough time, if we had enough time to reach back and give them a little bit of additional help, they
Mhm.
could make it. But because of the overcrowding and overfunding, I believe that we gravitate toward mediocrity and we try to help, quote unquote, the average child, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what I would propose, again, if they would let me do it, I would establish this school And then I would ask the judicial officials for these kids who are nonviolent and non-sexual offenders, okay, to quote unquote sentence them to my school, okay?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if they go through the school and qualify for a high school diploma, they will have no criminal record and be given a shot at life. 98% of these kids are pleaded out, and they don't. I believe they don't have a clue as to what they are pleading to,
Mm-hmm.
and they end up with records that follow them for the rest of their lives. The other thing that I would do is I would go to the law schools, okay,
Mm-hmm.
and ask them if they could find a way to let the students with supervisory representation, okay, do it for charitable or I don't care how what you call it,
Mm-hmm.
but you come into court with my with the student or with the juvenile, okay, and officially represent him. They're being pleaded out by public defenders who have aggravated assault and murder trials to work on. They don't have time to deal with them, but what they don't realize is the extent to which they are messing these kids up for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, so it sounds like, and please correct me if I'm wrong with any of this. I want to make sure I'm getting it. For you, the solution, right, is going to be much more proactive on the education front, right? It's like we're used to teaching, like you say, the average, or we think of that bell curve. We're used to just teaching everybody in the middle. The people on the left side kind of get forgotten about. The people on the right side, they're not challenged, so they do other things that are labeled troublemakers. So for what I'm hearing from you is it's providing new outlets for them not to just have to learn the common knowledge that everyone learns because we have to just justify the average, but to be able to specialize and go into things like this and fully understand the crime scene from start to finish in a school that you'd provide or education you provide. So it's new outlets and then more resources, being able to tap into these law schools and tap into the resources that they have to give these kids a chance that are going through the juvenile system right now. Because, like I said, like you said, 80% of them haven't even been held a charge yet. So
20%,
20%,
20%, one
20,
in five.
1 in 5, I apologize, 20% haven't even had a charge yet. So it's more of we need more outlets for these kids to potentially tap into and learn this process, as well as be more creative with the resources that we have to give to these kids. Is
I
that what I'm
believe
hearing?
a good, I believe a good start would be to ask the judge or the judicial authorities said, okay, those who are sitting here who haven't been charged and waiting to be charged, send them to school, send them to my school,
Hmm.
and then do diversion. Those who come into your court, and hopefully they'll come in with at least a law student and a who's being supervised.
Hmm.
Okay. And if they are nonviolent and non-sexual, sentence them to the school as well, with the caveat that if they qualify for the and get that high school diploma, they walk away without any criminal record.
But that means they have to put in the work, right? They have to come
They're
in, they have
gonna,
to get the diploma.
yeah. I would work them so hard, Dylan, they wouldn't have time to get in trouble.
So I want to get into that. This is incredible. Like your knowledge is this is something that I am ignorant in, right? So it's so fun to learn from someone like you. I do want to get towards the end here of because you're going through some uncomfort zones. You're really getting ready to venture out, right? To have a voice for some of these kids because it's something you're passionate about. I want to get to that in just a second, but for someone to learn more about you, for you to speak or people to get more of this information, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
They can connect with me in two ways, Dylan.
Okay.
I can be reached at Dr. Doug, that's Dr. Douglas Posey, all one word, Dr. Douglas Posey at gmail.com.
Hmm.
Uh, and I'll accept telephone calls as well.
Okay.
713 254-5607.
Well, you said it, not me. You're giving
Okay,
it.
but
Is
we can expand it. If I
yeah.
have to bring Catherine and a team in to start it, I would hope that I'll get enough calls or emails to get overwhelmed.
We'll try to say email first.
I'm praying to get overwhelmed.
Good. But we'll go email. We'll put in the description below, and as long as you give us the okay, we'll put the phone number there. But we'll start with email probably.
Okay, all
Um,
right.
Dr. Posey, thank you so much for being on today. Last three questions, because I do feel like this is uncharted waters, right? There's a lot of people that could see what you're looking to do for juvenile reform and say that's too tall of an order for me. Maybe the next guy or maybe the next lady. You're tackling it, right? You're willing to say, I'm willing to get outside my comfort zone and do this. So for you, what fuels you to continuously get uncomfortable? I'm sure you go through a lot of failure trying to do this. I think a lot of people don't talk about the failure part of the journey. They just talk about the destination. Why are you willing to continue to do this and do this and do this and be uncomfortable with it?
Dylan, I think that it goes all the way back, way back. I didn't realize I grew up in small town Centerville, Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
I graduated high school in 1960. I didn't realize I was poor until I left home.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize I was miseducated until I happened to get a chance to go to Utica Junior College in 1960. But the reason I got that opportunity, Dylan, was that my high school coach, the late Wordy Hicks from Bernice, Louisiana. I graduated from high school in 1960 and I didn't have a clue.
Mm-hmm.
I found an ex brother in law in New Orleans, and I went to New Orleans looking for slow jazz and fast girls. But what I found was 40-pound stalks of green bananas being brought in on fast boats from Latin America. And I was unloading bananas at 17 years of age.
Mm-hmm.
I was unloading bananas for international longshoremen on the New Orleans waterfront. I lasted 13 days, and God willing, I'll be 82 in September. The one time in my life, I tucked my tail and went back home, left New Orleans, went back to my mother's house.
Mm-hmm.
The following day, my high school coach came by and picked me up, had my mother pack my clothes, and took me to Utica Junior College. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Where I proceeded to fail algebra, advanced algebra, trigonometry, and analytic geometry in successive semesters. But just as Coach Hicks seemed to come along at the right time in my life, it just seemed like the good Lord continued to put the right people in my life. I made up all of those deficiencies. I'm sometimes I think that I'm self-educated to some extent because I didn't know the principles of math. But I made up all of those, and by the grace of God, made it through, qualified for the bachelor's degree in biology in 1964. Sometimes I wonder, Dylan, I don't have a way to know the answer. How many how many young people out there are salvageable if there was a Coach Hicks to come get them?
Mm-hmm.
What would have happened to me? Why did Coach Hicks come by my mother's house? All the thing he heard was, that the word got out in our small community that Miss Reba's son went to New Orleans and now he's back home.
Mm-hmm.
But what motivated him to come by to pick me up and take me to Utica Junior College? He died before he would tell me much about about that. But I think about him and pray for his offspring every day. And my promise is, if I could help one of these kids, I'll do what I'm trying to do for one juvenile. I wish I could save them all. but I would do what I'm trying to do for one of them.
Hmm. Man, that's thank you. That kind of answers my next two questions as well. So I want because that's powerful, and I'd like to recap what we've been talking about there. Thank you so much for coming on. The last thing that I really took from this is someone out there that is looking to get uncomfortable, or maybe struggling. They've tried and they've kind of stuck in the zone. They've went through their failures. It's almost owing it to the people that have lent a hand to you. Say, hey, I'm willing to push forward because someone believed in me. And if you've been lucky enough to have that in your life, it's the power of paying it forward to the next person. Like you said, even if it's one other person you can help, I think there's a lot of power in that, right? Like if someone that's been listening, you've been fortunate enough to get outside your comfort zone and make something, who helped you along the way? And who you can be that person for someone else. Who are you willing to do it for? I also love the things that we talked about of the passion you have of being behind the scenes. I think there's a lot of people out there that are like, man, I do so much work. Nobody sees me. They all see this person, right? But the beauty of it and the passion that you find is finding the truth, finding the why, and you care about that end result, right? You think of these young kids that are in the juvenile justice program that's not doing well, right? To be able to reform, and you want to do it for them, right? So the deep desire is much more than just, hey, look at me, Dr. Posey, because you've accomplished so much in your life. And if you're listening and you want to understand more about what Dr. Posey is doing, he is going to have his email below. We'll also put your website and any other ways to connect with you. I'll talk with your assistant there to learn more about his crime-based curriculum. It sounds extremely intriguing. I love new outlets for the next generation and new resources to be creative with how they can learn and find what their passion and their mastery is. Thank you so much for getting outside your comfort zone, Dr. Posey. Thank you so much for being on here today. Everyone that's listening, we will see you next week. And yeah, from the bottom of my heart, Dr. Posey, thanks for being on.
Absolutely a pleasure. Your comfort zone is just outside of, success lies just outside of the comfort zone.
Thank you. Dr. Posey, you're the man.